Hello! In this episode, we're going to look at how to connect your MMO web server with Unreal Engine. So I've tested this with both UE 4.26 and UE 5, so the steps were exactly the same. Feel free to use whichever one you like. I've personally decided to follow with UE 5 because I'm pretty excited about it, to be honest. If you wish to follow this step by step, do have a look at this blog post. There's actually two parts. I'll link both of them in the description. It will literally go step by step with how do you need to get this to work, right, with your project. Bear in mind, I'm actually a web developer coming from the world of Java and Ruby on Rails, so my C++ is super rusty and I've basically never worked with Unreal Engine, so there might be a couple of things which don't make sense maybe, I'm not sure. I've just followed Stack Overflow and documentation as best I could. So, and yeah, the main motivation for this is because I want to start with MMO space and I couldn't find any sort of guides on how to do it within Unreal Engine or basically any engine for that matter. So yeah, that's the purpose of these videos, to at least create some content which hopefully will allow others to make more, and yeah, you'll be better overall. All right, so before we get straight into code and blueprints, what we'll do is we'll show you what it is that we're building. And we just have a super basic level here. We're not really using anything from the level itself. We've created a bunch of widgets, so that's what we're going to be looking at here today. We have a simple UI, so this is a login UI. You've got username, password. We'll be able to click login and register. So we'll just register user. Okay. Okay, there we go. Successful. Okay, and this is going to be the character selection screen. So what we'll have here is round 1, 2, 3. 1. Okay, and so yeah, this is what we have right now. Later on, I'll make it so that when you click a button, you'll populate a character here and you'll be able to click login. So bear in mind, all of this is running against our server right now, which is running in Java. And yeah, if this is kind of what you want to build, then do follow along. By the way, the UI kind of sucks, like it's as expected because we focus on the data transfer here, right? So basically right now we've got these reusable blueprint classes and C++ code. So you'll be able to go onto our marketplace, you'll find the widgets that you like, you'll find the components, UI components that you like, and you'll be able to integrate them together. So that's kind of the purpose here, right? We're just pre-populating the data over web, and the way you use it is entirely up to you, right? So I'll click stop on this. And first of all, we'll probably just have a look at the C++ code to see what we have. So I've created a parent class for the widget, which is called my user account widget. In order to do that, you can click tools and click C++ class, all classes, and search widget. It'll be a widget component, right? So this will create your header and your C++ classes for your project, and they'll just be empty here, right? So you'll be able to populate them with the content that you need. Before we do that, it is worth pointing out that your project.build file will need to have these dependencies added, which is the JSON utilities, and the HTTP, because that's what we're going to be using here. If you don't, it'll give you some funny errors. So yeah, just make sure you have them. So in your header file, what we have here are a couple of things really. So the first thing is like the structs for responses. They'll sort of align with the responses from your Java web server. So for instance, your login response contains username, roles, and access token. So yeah, just structures for your data types. And the main thing that I'll want to cover are your API calls themselves, right? So for each API call, there's basically 4 functions. One of them is to actually call the API, all right? So for instance, handle function, so handle login in this case. Then you have on login response received. So basically on response received, because this is async. So when you make an API call that's basically async, you create a promise to get a response back. So you hook that up to another function which actually handles that response. And then you create notify success and notify fail. These are going to be blueprint implementable events. And the reason why is basically we're going to implement them in your blueprints, and we're going to hold all the logic in your blueprints with, what to do with that response, right? So they do follow a pattern. So if you look at login, there's 4 functions, register, 4 functions, and they follow the same pattern, right? So we'll have a quick look into your C++ file. Yeah, let's go through the login scenario just to sort of summarize what it is that we're doing. First of all, we just specify your API path. So in this case, your login API path. You then basically hook up the onProcess request complete to the function which will handle the response. So in this case, on login response received. You then populate the input parameters. So in this case, username and password. You just serialize them, and then you populate the headers. So yeah, you've got like things like accept JSON, content type, JSON, and yeah, set that as set content as string, and you process the request. So then you look at the response received function. So the main things you need to look at here is was successful. So this is just a Boolean. If not successful, for instance, you're not authorized, it will be false. So you can just notify login fail in that case. You also get the request and response. So with a response, you'll be able to deserialize that data, put it into your response object, and then stick that onto your login success with the response object. So here we just make sure that it has the data that we want. So for instance, when we log in, the main thing that we really care about is the access token. So we just populate the access token. We actually do populate the other stuff as well, such as get string field username, get string field access token, and we even put the array of roles, but we're not really going to use them. So feel free to simplify this data structure if you like, but we might need it later, so may as well implement it now, right? So notify login success, and yeah, that's it. The other 2 functions, so these ones, notify fail and notify success, these are blueprint implementable events, so they're not referenced in your C++ class. Okay, and that's it, right? So it may look pretty complicated, it may look like a lot, but it should be fairly simple once you understand the structure and what it's doing. And to be fair, it can do with a bit of refactoring here, right? Like I tried to keep them together so that you can basically copy just one file and have it implemented in your code. All right, so let's have a look at here. What do we have? I'll start with the root and we'll sort of work our way up. So the first thing that I needed to create was a game instance settings object. So the reason I created this is because I wanted to pass one global variable, and in my case, it was an access token. So I had a quick look around and people suggested to use a game instance object. So if I double click here, like super simple, right? Like all I needed to do was add a new variable, access token, set it a string, make it public so that other classes can access it, and that's it. So super simple. Maybe there's another way to use global variables. I'm not sure. It does seem to work. So yeah, let's see. So after you've created that, yeah, we may as well quickly mention the level. So I just created myself a new level because I created a third-person character game. So I'm not looking to open that at the beginning. I want just basically a completely empty map where I'll just populate the widgets. So that's why I created it. It has nothing in there. This is just a very simple level, default level with nothing there, right? Then I'll go into blueprints. So what I have here are the game mode, HUD, and player controller. So I'll go from right to left because that will make more sense. So one of the reasons to create a new level is because you want to disable certain inputs and enable others. So if I click play, I'll show you. If I'm clicking the WASD keys, I'm not moving forward. I'm not able to look around the map, but I can click these boxes, right? So that's what the player controller class is trying to do. Basically, if you look into here, I've disabled all the inputs here. I've enabled the mouse interface, and I've also blocked the input. I think this might be doing the same thing as here, but I don't know, maybe. So that's what you want to do here. With a player controller that's used on your login screen, you want to disable your basically movement and enable the mouse, right? So it's fairly simple there. Your HUD, this is a heads-up display. What you want this to do is basically load in your widgets. So in our case, I'm creating the login widget and populating it to the viewport. So again, super simple. And that's what you need the HUD for. Now I also create the login game mode, and the game mode is what actually links all the things together. So for instance, here I reference my player controller class and I reference my HUD class. And yeah, so that's basically why you need the game mode, right? If you go into your world settings and you have a look at the game mode override, you can see here that I've selected login game mode here, okay? There might be some other interesting settings here. Let's say, so everything looks good. Okay, cool. Oops. It's back. Okay, let's get into the widgets now then. So we've got a couple of widgets here, so I'll sort of go in the order that you saw them, which is your login widget. You then were able to register, and when you logged in, you're on the character selection page. This page also uses one other custom widget to load in the character names essentially, and you're also able to create characters. So let's go into the login widget first. What do we have here? So it looks fairly long. There's a couple of things that it does really. So before you're able to actually call the login functions, you'll need to reparent your class. So what we've created was these user account widget parent classes. So what you'll have to do is click File and reparent blueprint and select my user account widget. This will change it to here, so you'll see parent class my user account widget. Just compile that and you'll be able to access these functions like handle login and stuff, right? So on button login clicked, so let's just go on to the designer here. This is the login button, just give it a sensible name. You'll go here, on clicked, view, handle login, right? These two parameters, username and password, I've set them as strings. Let's just quickly show you how I did that. Here's your text box. There's an event for on text change. So if you click view, I just set them to variables. You don't need to do this. You can just get the text box and take the text field out and transform it to a string and then link it to your API. But I think this is a bit neater, so feel free to use whichever one you like. So the call itself is super simple, but then, like I said before, the notify login success or notify function success, for instance, these are blueprint implementable events. So they'll be controlled on your blueprint class. So what we've got here is on the login, we just care about the access token. So I set that as a local variable. Now, to be honest, I don't really need it as a local variable because I'm directly saving it to the game instance settings class. Remember essentially where we're setting the global variables. So now I've basically got two copies, right? I put an artificial delay of 1 second. I then remove all widgets and create the character selection widget, right? And I add that to the viewport. So basically, click login, I make an API call. Once the API call is successful, I store the access token, I remove all widgets, and I put the character selection widget onto the screen. So that's what it does. If you fail to log in, it just says problem logging in. Okay. Now let's have a look at what happens if you click register button. On the register button, all you do is create the register widget, you remove all other widgets, and then you add the register widget to the viewport. So super simple, right? Okay, so since we referenced the register widget, let's have a look at what that does. You have a couple of items on the designer again. And by the way, the components that we've used here are just the common ones from here, right? So basically, for instance, you have the text fields for these. Actually, I think pretty much everything here is a text field, right? You're able to just click, select text like this. So username, for instance, is just a text field. You're able to wrap this with a button, and then all of a sudden you have a button with text. Okay, and actually these ones are text boxes, right? So it's just this one here. So once you've created a UI that you like, basically I've done very similar stuff. So for each text box, I've got on text changed. I populate a local variable. Again, this is optional. You don't need to do that. And then on button register click, I've got this implemented. So very similar to the login. When you click the register button, you just call the register function. And by the way, you're going to have to reparent this this class as well, right? So for every blueprint class that you're using and you wish to use the API methods, you're going to need to reparent them to my user account widget, right? Because that's what we implemented in C++. Okay, so you call the handle register, and this hooks up the event to notify register success and notify register fail. So when you're successfully, when you've got a successful response, you get this register response, which contains username and email. You only care about username in this case. In fact, you don't really care about anything, right? Like this is just to populate the message on the top left. And after a little delay, we go back to the login. So I've actually refactored this login function, so you can see it there. And the reason I've done that is because I've used it in two places. The second one being when you click the login button. So I'll just show you this first. You can see when you click the login, all you do is go to login, right? So super simple. Let's have a look at what this does. You create the login widget and you remove all widgets. So you basically remove the register widget and you add the login widget to the viewport. So yeah, super simple there too. Okay, we'll look at the character selection widget now. So this is what we have here. You have a full viewport again, and you've got a couple of buttons: create new character, delete, login. So these buttons will be disabled. What you can't see here is this uniform grid character list. Now, this uniform character list is set to size to content. So the reason I've done this is so that it puts a uniform space between each item that's added. Otherwise, if you size it up to whatever you want, it will basically dynamically allocate the uniform spacing between them. So I mean, feel free to design this as you like. This is just what I've done here. Now, inside this uniform grid, I populate my components, which basically have a button with the character name on it. So that's what this little guy is, character component widget. So if I look into here, this is a custom size. So you can see custom here, custom size component. And inside what I have is a button with a text box, and the text box is set to empty. So the name is text box character name. This is promoted as a variable, so you'll be able to see here that this text box character name is a public variable. Actually does nothing, right? Because this class is basically controlled from the character selection widget, and we're going to have a look at it very shortly. But basically, if I go back from the designer, when we create a new character or where we load the characters to our screen, we will write inside here, inside this text box, the character name, and we'll just draw this button onto the uniform grid, right? So let's go back to here. I'll just go into the graph view, but you'll be able to see here that we've also got the onClicked populated here. But we'll have a look at the constructors first. So the first thing, basically anything outside the login component, we want to copy our Atos token over, right? So basically I create a local variable Atos token so that we don't need to do this conversion every time. So when we construct it, we cast to game instance settings and we get the current game instance. This will give us access to the Atos token. So we get the Atos token and we set it locally, right? With this, because it's a constructor, we already know that we logged in. So straight away, we want to fetch the account characters. So that's what we do. As soon as we get the Atos token, we get the account characters, and we also disable the button login and button delete. Okay, so that's the constructor. It does a couple of things. And once the account characters are successfully loaded, we can start looking at this function here. So get characters. So what we do is we break down the account character response and we get ourselves a character list. We set this as a local variable for easy access. We also remove the children from the uniform grid. So this is in order to sort of refresh the list, right? For instance, when we create a new character, we go back to the widget for the character selection. We want to refresh that list. So we remove all the characters and then we repopulate them based on fresh results from the API call. Okay, so here we have the account characters. We set them to a local variables right there. So then we do for each account character, so for each loop, we create a character component widget. So this is this guy here. And we basically set the character name. So see text box character name to set text. And the name comes from the API call, right? So you can see it here. So break account character base, we do text to string, and we put the text there. Okay. We also basically add one to the components or to the uniform grid component so that it adds it to the next row essentially, right? Because otherwise it will sort of overlap them on the same row. So that's the purpose of that. Okay, so that's this. Let's have a look at what the create character button does. So all this does is add the create character widget to the screen, very similar to the other ones. And notice this one doesn't actually remove itself from the viewport, right? So the other widgets usually remove themselves before they add components to the viewport. This is why you'll be able to see all the components when you click create character. And reload characters, this is a custom event. We'll have a look at its use very soon. It's within the create character widget. And this guy is basically a public event where you're able to just simply recall get account characters. Now note that on the response is when we remove the character from list, which is why this works, right? Okay, let's just show you how it's used. Create character widget. You've got this small design, so I've just added a small border so you can see these components a bit nicer. Because I'm probably going to put a character behind it later on. I just want a bit of contrast there. All we need is a character name at the moment, and you'll have two buttons, one for create and one for go back. So let's go to our graph view. Let's go from top to bottom. So as usual, we've got the event construct and we set ourselves the Atos token, make it available to use locally. You then have the back button, so it just removes itself from the viewport, and creating new character. Okay, so basically when you click create, and this is where I didn't do the setting the text box value directly to a string, right? So you can see it's slightly more ugly, right? But it does the same thing. So on the button create click, we feed in our attest token, we get the edit box character name, we get the text, we convert it to string, and we stick that into the name. Okay, so it does the same thing that we do in all the other methods. Now, when we're successful, we remove it ourselves from the parent, so we remove the create new character box, and then we find the widget for the character selection screen, and we basically tell it to reload characters, right? So if I go back to here, you see this custom event. This is what we call here, right? Reload characters. Okay, and that's it. That's everything. So yeah, actually there's quite a lot of content for what it is that we're trying to accomplish, but I guess that's just the nature of web development in general, right? But hopefully this makes some sense. And to be honest, I haven't really seen too many alternatives. So this is just like a starter on this implementation. I'm gonna grow the web server code a bit more, so make a couple more fields there. So hopefully it'll be sort of more generic and more useful to people. And yeah, I say, yeah, good luck with your projects, and let me know if there's anything else that I've missed. Cheers, guys. See ya.